Hello, everyone. This is Lorraine Marston, and tonight we're having a workshop on energy psychology. And what I would like to do, as always, is begin by centering ourselves and saying a little prayer so that we get the most out of the experience possible. So for today, I'm going to do a chant to Ganesha, who in the Hindu tradition is like the king of the angels, and he's the energy that has so much intelligence. So he's going to make it so that we understand it and we benefit to the most. So I'll just chant a little bit. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Ganesha, we thank you for your wisdom, and you ask that you share it generously with us tonight so that we can be intelligent like you and learn what is most important for us. We ask that what is said is shared in a way that's understood and that the right things are shared, and we thank you for this. So, what is energy psychology? It's a rather new science, and it is based on some energy techniques that are ancient, and it has been brought forward by a very famous scientist in biology, and his name is Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he talks about the biology of belief. This is a more modern form of talking about the energy psychology, and he talks a lot about epigenetics. And what those things are is they have been discovering that there is a lot of connection between your beliefs and your biology. And we're not going so far as this belief goes tonight, but I wanted to make it apparent to you that how far the power of our brains and our thoughts go. And yogis have known this for centuries, and the ascended masters teach this, but now it's beginning to be proven in science. And basically, epigenetics talks about that we have these genetic codes and we have genetic predispositions, but just because you have a gene, for instance, to get diabetes doesn't mean that it has to happen. What it means is that if you don't take care of yourself, it most likely might happen. But if you live a good lifestyle and you eat your veggies and not too much sugar and you exercise, you probably will never get diabetes. And it is so with a lot of diseases. Cancer is in some ways an attack on our immune system by our own body. In some ways of looking at it. I am not a doctor and I don't know all the details, but it is becoming clear to some scientists that most, probably all our maladies, for me, my belief is that everything is connected to our thoughts. And so if we go along with mediocre thoughts that are in our environment, we're going to get mediocre results in our lives, in our relationships, and in our health. And so that's a little bit of what epigenetics and the biology of belief is about. And so if you're interested in more, looking up Dr. Bruce Lipton, he's on YouTube. There's some really interesting information. And as we go further, I'm going to demonstrate some of the things that apply to energy psychology. And I wanted to also share with you some of the stuff that's been published by the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. It's known as ASAP, and it's a conglomeration of practitioners who do healing in ways that they're manipulating the body's energy so that it flows more healthily and people get better. And when they do that, some of the things that you might already be familiar with are concepts such as the chakras, using the chakras. We have a invisible tube in our spine, and in that tube, energy flows up and down. And if it's not flowing at all, then we're not alive. So we have it flowing. But if it's flowing in an ever increased and healthy manner, then we're more healthy. And there are certain spots along there that specifically put types of energy into our body, and those are the chakras. For instance, the root chakra is often said to be the root of our security or lack of security. And then the color that's associated with it helps us to feel secure and grounded or or not, if we're not. And so that's just an example, is the chakras are often used by some energy psychology practitioners. Acupuncture. The Chinese have been doing this for 5 years, and they understand that there's some kind of flow of energy in the body, and if it's flowing properly, the body tends to heal and stay healthy. And if it's blocked or flowing too strong, there's imbalance. So that's another example of energy psychology, and it goes back like forever. There's another modality that was developed in the 1970s, I believe, and it was called thought field therapy. It was developed by a psychotherapist who had also studied, acupuncture. And he actually had a patient who he was counseling, and she had a phobia for water, and she also had migraines. I'm not sure what her other problems were, but she had a bad phobia for water, and it was getting to the point where she was afraid to shower. But he was working on her headache at that time, and he just got a download, an impulse to tap on a certain spot on her face with his finger. Probably some spot that he'd learned in acupuncture as good for the head. And so he tapped on the spot, and she said to him, you know what, I'm not afraid of water anymore. And she ran outside. I guess he had a swimming pool, and he went running after her, and she says, don't worry, I'm not going to jump in and drown, but I'm truly not afraid to be by water anymore. And so that was the start of thought field therapy, and he used his knowledge of acupuncture to develop protocols, it's called, where you tap first, and you would tap with your fingers, and you would do it in a certain order and certain places for each different malady, and it was very comprehensive. And then he put it out there, and I know of people that spent $100,000 to learn this thought field therapy. So it wasn't very accessible for most of us, but there was one of his followers who took his course, thought field therapy. His name was Gary Craig, and Gary Craig was a real, he's still alive. He's a real investigator and a pioneer with ideas and things like that. And so he took thought field therapy and he made it simple for everybody. And he developed something called emotional freedom technique, which is more commonly known as tapping these days. Anybody heard of the tapping? Yeah, well, so that's where the tapping came from. And so what Gary Craig did, the founder of EFT, he simplified it. He said, okay, we're going to pick a bunch of spots that are easy to access. And he knew that all the different meridians, those are the channels that run up and down in the body, according to acupuncture. He knew they were all connected anyway, at some place or another. So he chose some spots on the face and chest that were easy to find. And then we used the same set of spots for any malady under the sun. But the other thing that he did was he added words to it. And not the kind of words that psychotherapists do. I'll just do a little aside. It was really developed to speed up psychotherapy, is what EFT was to do. And the thing is, if you go to a talk therapist, you go in there and you talk about your problem, and then you come back next week and talk about it some more. And, you know, sometimes over time you get a new way of looking at your problem and it goes away gradually. But it's really dwelling on the problem. Oops. You know, and positive thinking, mindset circles, that's like counterproductive. We should be dwelling on this solution and magnetizing it to us. So Gary Craig wanted to speed that process up. And it does have two sections. First of all, it has a section where you make peace with your problem and acknowledge that you have the problem, and at the same time calm down your system. And then you tap. And you can do it very simply, where you just say the name of your problem, which sounds like you're dwelling on it, but at the same time you're relaxing your system. So if I have a headache and I tap in all these spots and say my headache, my headache, my headache, and every time my body's reminded about the headache, it relaxes a little bit. Pretty soon the headache is gone. And that's basically how EFT works. So it's one of the foremost examples of energy psychology. I'm just going to look for a couple other things to, yeah, this and other types of energy psychology have been very beneficially used for things like trauma and anxiety. And I know I've seen videos of this. Gary Craig actually went and worked with victims, soldiers who had been traumatized in Vietnam or whatever. I remember watching one video of some soldier. He hadn't had a good night's sleep in like 30 years. He's afraid to go in a restaurant. You know, I had to sit with his back to the wall in case something would come in and explode and shoot him. And like, it was an ongoing nightmare. And he had 1 hour of EFT. And then I think he had a tune-up session the next day. All his PTSD was gone. And there's other amazing stories like that of people. So it doesn't always work that fast. But for most things, if you persist, it removes the trauma around it. And what we have is we have these glands inside. One way of looking at it is we have a glandular system. We have the endocrine glands, and they give us our energy for that fight or flight response. Well, if they're overactive, that's no good. And then we get emotions. So if I have fear running in my body, I have chemicals. And so something in the tapping closes down the receptors for the fear chemicals. So we stop feeling fearful, or if it's anger, we stop feeling so angry. And so that's sort of how it works. Nobody knows exactly, and really in the end, it's like, does it work or not? And there are many proven studies that it does work. I just wanted to give you a couple other ideas of ways it's being used. It says here there are currently over 100 research studies, including 50 randomized controlled trials published in professional journals, confirming the value of it, energy psychology. And it's been used by a lot of people. I know there's chiropractors that use it, psychologists. It can be used in medicine. It's just not, like, doctors are trained to give a pill. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing that works, and it doesn't mean it's the best thing in many cases. They just do what they're trained to, and they will lose their license if they just go off on a tangent and go recommending too many other things. So we mustn't be too hard on them. But we do have a responsibility for our own lives and our own health. And so if we know of another way, then we have that option too. And the thing with all of these energy psychology systems, they don't have side effects in that, you know, if you're going to do EFT, then you're going to end up with this other disease, you know, get rid of your first disease and get something else. It's not like with the pill. Sometimes the pills give you something else, but this doesn't. And the other thing with energy psychology, the body is kind of the master here, and it's rightly so. The body is a self-healing mechanism, and it knows it has its innate wisdom and knows what it wants to heal first. So sometimes I might be doing, for instance, the tapping, because that's the modality that I use the most. I might be doing it for the headache, but maybe the pain in the knee goes away first. Well, you know, that doesn't mean it failed. It means that's what your body wants the result it wants first. Okay? And so it encourages us to trust the wisdom in the body. What a great thing. We have been so ingrained to trust the wisdom of specialists who know more and more about less and less, and they know nothing about anything out of their thing. And, you know, there's advertisements all the time about, go see your doctor, go do this, go do that. It never says, go look within and see what your body wants to do. I feel that we need to revamp our education system so that we learn to trust our inner wisdom. And using the energy psychology techniques is a way that we can bridge that gap, because people who aren't ready to accept all the ideas about how your mind controls everything, they can still get benefit from the tapping. So that's nice. You don't have to have a belief system. You can be an atheist, you can be a medical doctor. If you tap, you're likely to get some kind of results. So that's kind of nice. And I'm just going to open up, I was just wondering if there were any questions at this point before I go on. No questions? Okay, well, let's just carry on then. So I'm going to start with a few little exercises and things that I heard of before the word energy psychology even came out. There's one thing called brain gym. And especially if you have children, you might want to look up this thing, brain gym. I don't have my paper here. There's a bunch of little exercises that you can do, and they join up the two sides of the brain. And when the two sides of the brain are connected, we tend to relax. We're more confident and we're more grounded. So you might look up brain gym, and there's some ones called brain gems that are just little exercises you can do. I believe there's some you go like this, there's others where you cross, but you're connecting the two sides of the body. And I'm going to just demonstrate one for you right here that is a great one for anyone. It will energize you. It will, as I say, wake up both sides of your brain and your body and make it much easier for you to deal with stress or make decisions or whatever. And it's a great one to teach kids, especially if they're antsy. So it's called cross crawls, but I'm not going to crawl. And it's really just marching in place and opposite arm to the leg. So this one, this one, this one. And if you do that for 30 seconds or a minute, you are going to feel energized. You can also slap your knee. It's fun. You know, if you're working at something and you're getting stale, get up and do a few cross crawls. Makes you breathe a little bit. But it's also doing something for my brain. So that's a little, a little energy psychology demo here. I took a modality called One Brain many years ago, long before EFT, and it used that, and it used certain holding your hand here and various other exercises, even using a light shone on your third eye in certain cases to move energy in the body so that you could think more completely and heal. So those are some. And nowadays there's a very famous lady called Donna Eden. You may have heard of her. She talks about energy medicine, and she's the most enthusiastic lady I ever saw, and you can find her lots on YouTube. She's very generous with, you know, some of her techniques and stuff. But she was someone who had a very serious disease in her 20s. I forget now if she had MS or something, but she was in bad shape. But she studied natural medicine and ideas to do with energy, and she healed herself. And now she's probably my age, and she's just going gung-ho teaching these things to people. And so a couple things that she's big on, which they are used in other modalities too, but I'm just using her as an example of someone who practices some energy medicine. If we put our hand on our heart, that brings energy to our heart. And if we breathe and focus there, we get calmer, we become more loving. If we want, and this is not from Donna Eden, but if we have one hand on our heart and one hand on our head, then we can connect our head and our heart. And that's the ideal, you know, that we're from intelligence and from love at the same time. And no matter what normal society says, having a brain turned on is not enough. We need to have our heart integrated. And it has been proven and shown that the heart has a larger energy field by far, like I think 50 times larger than the brain. So that's a good one. That's just a centering exercise. If you're upset, you can tap here between the fourth and fifth finger on the back of your hand. I'll just show you, whoops, up here where you can see that. And this is called it connects to something called the triple warmer, which is part of acupuncture. And so when you tap on this, this calms down your nervous system. So if there's a few of these that you remember to use when you're upset, they can help an awful lot. So this is another bit of energy psychology. Okay. And even just a simple thing, I know that there's, and I will demonstrate very briefly after this, another one, but just the fact, you've seen people, you know, put their hand on their head. Well, often we do things to self-soothe. And, you know, why would putting your hand on your head, oh, you know, I can't think or whatever. Why would people do that sort of thing instinctively? Well, we have a electromagnetic field inside our head and emanating out. We have an electromagnetic field in our hand as well. And that brings more energy to the head and to the prefrontal cortex. And this front part of the brain here is where we can stop and think and make a calm decision, a wise decision. Whereas if that part of the brain shuts down, and it does often, the back of our brain is what operates, and that's the fight or flight part, what's called the reptilian brain. So just remembering to calm yourself or your loved one by a hand on the front of the head can be an immensely powerful and useful thing to do. So if it was just like, okay, I don't know what to do, I'm just going to give myself 3 minutes with, I'm just making this up, maybe it's 2 minutes, whatever, like this, and just relax and breathe deeply and not think about this problem. Then maybe you're going to be a different person after that, and you'll be able to handle it. I know myself, when I'm balanced, I can handle all kinds of upsets, and I can do it in a logical and effective manner. But if I'm spun out and anxious, I rush from one thing to another. I don't finish one thing. I'm indecisive and all kinds of things. So this is a useful thing to do. Now, how are we doing here? We're doing fine. Yeah, I'm just going back to this one because I use this in EFT sometimes, but not by itself. And if you're upset, you need to tap here for like a minute. And then if it's still bothering you, then switch hands. So that's the way it's instructed to use it as a calming mechanism. 1 minute and then switch hands if you're not already feeling better. Okay, and I have one more here that's kind of interesting. If you want, you can raise your arms, and there is something to do with your energy flow if your elbows are straight. So it's good to have your elbows straight. Don't be slackered. Raise your arms, and then if you're stressed out, just blow the stress out. And that will, you might have to do it more times than that, but that will blow a lot of the stress out, and it will get energy moving up and down the central meridian, as I had spoken to you before. So there's some ideas. And now I want to go on to something that's not exactly energy psychology, but it could perhaps fit in with it. And this is phonemic intelligence, which one of my dear teachers has been working on for 20 years, and it's just really becoming a big thing. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of it. And what it is he realized, and there's been Harvard research and some other company as well that has proven that sounds activate the brain to make you more intelligent and therefore less stressed out. So if you take it down to the smallest sound possible, that sound becomes more and more powerful. And the sound that he's especially teaching people to use these days is the sound ah. And ah is very creative. And so you can chant the sound ah and put it into parts of your brain and get results. And I'll just show you one way that it's done. You can chant to remove negative thinking. And what we need to do is put the sound into this part of our brain, not the very front, but just behind, sort of behind the eye sockets. There's something called the anterior cingulate there. And how I was taught to do it was to rub my hands, put my hand over an eye, and just really imagine all that heat and a big white light going into the eye and behind the eye. And then I breathe in and I chant ah. Ah. Now, I'm not really teaching this today, but I will tell you, if you do it 2 to 4 times in that eye and then 2 to 4 times in the other eye, you will feel better. I find myself thinking of new solutions and just feeling calmer and happier just from that little exercise. So now we're going to go on and do a little bit of EFT. That's my favorite energy psychology modality, and it's the one I was trained in, and actually have been a trainer for many years. And so EFT can be done by yourself once you've learned for simple things, but it does work more effectively with an expert with you who can guide you with the words, or if it's not working out, to help you. So this is just to show you a little bit. There may be workshops I'm offering where you could join in. This is actually a modality that is really effective in a group. It is quite possible for each person in the group to have their own issue that they're working on, but then we do the tapping together, and the group energy adds to it, and there's lots of focus that way. So I'm just going to show you today. And I would encourage you to tap along. So if you're listening to the recording later, you could tap along, but I'm going to just do some tapping for relaxing, because often when people first try EFT, they're uptight. So let's just relax first. But if you're already familiar with it, then when I say wanting to relax, then you could just you can say the same thing as me, but you could have made the intention that I really want this pain in my shoulder to go down. And it will probably work. Over time, it will work. Sometimes it works very instantly. Other times you have to pursue. So I'm not saying that it's, a magic solution for everything, but let's give it a shot. So the first part of doing an EFT session is to make friends with the problem. So I'm going to pretend that my problem is that I really need to relax and I'm all stressed out. In fact, I'm going to personally for myself say that I don't need to feel so hungry right now, because I know that that's an emotional reaction that I'm having. I know I'm not really that hungry. So, okay, so the first thing we do is tap on the side of one hand. It doesn't matter which hand we tap on. We take this, like if you were a karate expert and you were going to chop the block, that's the karate chop spot. And you take a couple fingers from your other hand and tap there. And then just repeat after me. Even though I feel stressed out, I deeply and completely accept myself. And repeat again. Even though I feel so stressed out, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel so stressed out, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now, just a little quick aside. No, that doesn't mean we're just going to accept that we're stressed out and then feel okay. No, it's just acknowledging where the body's at and being okay with it. So now we're going to tap on some other spots. And at first I'm going to talk about those being stressed out, and then I'm going to change my words, and you'll see. And just notice how your system feels. So tapping gently about 5 to 7 times. Feeling stressed out. Then at the beginning of the eyebrow, feeling stressed out. the side of the eye, feeling stressed out. Under the eye, just at the top of the bone. You don't want to hurt your eyeball. Feeling stressed out. Under the nose. Feeling stressed out. On the chin, not the point of the chin, just in between the lips and the chin. Feeling stressed out. Now the next one's the collarbone. You have to kind of find the notch here and then go out and down a bit. So you've got two to choose from. You can do one or both. Feeling stressed out. Then there's a point under the armpit. Feeling stressed out. Some people just do it with the same arm. And one more. Feeling stressed out. Now, I can't speak for you, but I'm actually more relaxed than before just by tapping on those places. We're going to do another round and go on from there. And normally, if I were doing a session with people, I might just keep going around tapping, but right now we're just going to go back to this, and I'll use slightly different words. I have a whole package of words that I can choose from that work, but we'll keep it simple here tonight. So even though I have this remaining stress, and repeat it after me, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this remaining stress, I'm completely willing to let go of it. Even though I have this remaining stress, I love and accept myself, and I'm willing to let go of all the stress. Okay, going through the points. This remaining stress. This remaining stress. The beginning of the eyebrow. Then go to the outside of the eye. This remaining stress. Under the eye, this remaining stress. Then under the nose, this remaining stress. Under the mouth, this remaining stress. The collarbone spots, this remaining stress. Excuse me. This remaining stress. And I'm going to end at the top of the head. This remaining stress. Very good. Now you may have noticed that I yawned near the end of that, and that was me just releasing tension from my body. I feel quite relaxed and I feel like yawning or breathing deeply right now. So it's definitely helped me, and I can see some people have their eyes closed, and that's okay sometimes, and it means that you are really relaxing. So that's a little introduction to EFT. I'm available for sessions privately, and I probably will be putting on some group sessions in the next while. The other thing I wanted to do before we open up to questions and things is talk about, well, what's the future of energy medicine and energy psychology? And I'm becoming a really great fan of this man called Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He has written a number of books, but he has been able to take people who had serious diseases and doing a series of processes that are, some of them are energy medicine, but a lot of them are more without actions. It's more like meditative, but knowing how the energy flows in the body and then activating it. And they have cured very, very serious illnesses. I'll let you look that up on YouTube or in his books for yourself, but I'll give you a couple examples from this book that he talks about. I've talked to you about the central channel that we have in our spine and the chakras that grow or lie along them, and they bring energy in and bring energy out, and they need to be operating properly or the energy doesn't flow properly. Well, the yogis are the ones that have introduced that to the world long ago. But Dr. Joe Dispenza has a diagram in this book, and it's got the central channel there. I think you can see that. And then the spots in the middle towards the bottom are chakras. And he's talking about how you can do an exercise where you clench your core muscles and make the energy move. And I am living proof of that working. There are other ways to make it work too, but there is one type of yoga that's out there called Kundalini yoga. And many of their exercises have to do with breathing techniques and then it's often just a repetitive action with a leg or an arm or your head or swinging your shoulders, and it will bring energy and activate energy in that part. And then you're breathing in a certain way, as quite concentrated at times, and it really brings the energy and makes it flow. And I just learned it. I'm actually a trained yoga teacher and have done a lot of yoga for many years, but this is my first real exposure and practice of Kundalini yoga. And I found that with only 20 minutes or so of Kundalini yoga, I would feel very energized and strong, like powerful inside. That's because the central channel is being activated. And that's just extremely powerful. There are yogic breathing exercises to balance the two channels, and different things will happen in your brain if one is working and not the other. But the best is when they're both working. Anyway, that's one example that Dr. Joe Dispenza knows about it and uses it in his work. And one of his chapters in this latest book is talking about embracing elevated emotions. Well, that's a whole study, because if our emotions are elevated, everything is elevated. You cannot have elevated, happy, blissful, joyous emotions and feel sad at the same time and be thinking about your sickness at the same time. So I would just encourage you to understand that this energy psychology can be used for anything. And actually with the EFT, there's people that have used it to help themselves go through cancer, whether or not they were taking chemo or things. If they were taking the chemo, the EFT helped them to balance out so they would feel better and get over it a lot faster. But there are people that use EFT to stay on their game, like professional athletes, baseball players, golf players. They pay a lot of money always to stay on their best game, and energy psychology is one of the things, because they know that they need to have their mind and their body working together, not against each other, for success. So I would encourage you to learn more about these things, and I'll help you any way that I can. Just before we end, I wanted to talk about things that are coming up. I'm not going to talk about the workshops in the next 2 days, but I'm going to be starting a whole series of workshops and classes and actually develop it into a program. And it's going to focus on money and abundance, because it really is at the core of us. And when you really think of it, we're not living our destiny if we're poor. We are not, as spiritual beings, we didn't come here to be miserable. And often, I know that money per se, like the coins and the bills and the bank account numbers, are not happiness, but you can buy the experiences that you want that are your happiness. For instance, I was gardening today. Well, I was able to pay for the garden plot and seeds and drive over there and all that. And if I didn't have a car and, was on welfare or something, I probably wouldn't have had the money to sign up for the garden. And, that was a blissful experience. So money is important to all of us. And it's not going to be the sole focus, but if we develop a healthy attitude towards abundance, everything else flows so much better. And I'm just called to talk a little bit about the sunshine that was out there today. The sunshine makes you feel good. What color is the sun, guys? The sun is golden yellow. There is something very special and healing about gold. So it's not really the bank accounts we're after, but to have that energy of gold. Gold is very healing. I have heard that people that have worked in gold mines don't get sick. I just heard that recently. There is something very healing about gold. So it is something we want to invite into our lives. And it is definitely something that this world needs right now, is a prosperity reset. So I really am devoted to focusing on that. And when I do my courses, am I going to use energy psychology? Probably, because we all need to get rid of our angst and fear about money or whatever else is up. And if you're there and you're feeling and your heart is broken, well, then maybe you need some energy psychology so you feel better, and then you can get on with your job, your task that you chose with money. So we'll work on everything, but money is the focus. When everyone has enough money, a lot of suffering will go away. People will not be compelled to manipulate each other out of greed, and there's no need to have dishonesty and all these things if we all feel safe and prosperous. And this is what I wish for the world and for everyone. And that's going to be my focus here very shortly. So anyway, this is Lorraine again. I hope you enjoyed this little introduction to energy psychology. And I hope that I will have the pleasure of seeing you at a workshop soon. Thank you so much.